be here back in Rome, and thank you for being prompt. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this very special event. And I'm very glad to be here and to offer the opening presentation. I guess if you're wanting to play games, you can go to the Lego presentation. Here is much more serious. But we're going to have some fun as well. And I've looked at the program, some very interesting presentations, and I am also looking forward to sharing with you the rest of the day. I'm very grateful to the interpreters, to Roberta and Elisabetta, who are hidden in a box at the top, who are going to make the Italian presentations available to me and to our other international speakers. Sto imprendendo l'italiano lentamente, ma non parlo molto. So I have to rely on the interpreters. If you have headsets, then you also are relying on them for my presentation. So I hope they give a good presentation. Thank you, ladies. Risk management is one of the most important things we can do. Not only in projects, not only in programs or portfolios or businesses or organizations, but in life. And I believe that risk management is a life skill. We've learned to survive as people by coping with uncertainty, whether it's uncertainty in the environment, uncertainty in society, uncertainty between nations, uncertainty in technology, everything that we have learned to do as the human species has been in response to uncertainty. And it's how we grow, it's how we develop, by facing uncertainty and adapting. And I believe that risk management as a life skill can help us in bringing up our children, in managing our careers, in dealing with our personal health, in looking after our finances, our relationships. I've been privileged to work with a number of national governments looking at how risk-based thinking can help us face the challenges of an uncertain international world. And I believe it's something so important that we must get it right. And it breaks my heart as a risk specialist to see people who say risk management doesn't work. Of course risk management works. It's just that we're not doing it properly. We're not doing it well. We wouldn't be here if we didn't know how to manage risk. In terms of crossing the road or driving in these crazy traffic conditions or living in a world with lots of health challenges and so on. We're all here because we know how to manage risk. And we must do it better for our projects and our programs. And so I believe that risk management is natural, it's intuitive, it's important, and it's easy. So what I want to do this morning, starting with risk management as our first presentation, because it's the most important thing we can do, I would like to challenge your thinking about what exactly is a risk. I think that projects fail or are challenged because we don't manage all of the risks that we face. We have a very narrow view of risk, and so we only manage some of the risks. And there are many more risks in our projects than we see, and so these other risks cause us to fail or to be challenged. And so we are taking many more risks with our eyes closed. We don't see the risks, and so we don't manage them. And so they affect our projects. And my title for this presentation is How to Manage the Risks That You Didn't Know You Were Taking. We, of course, will manage the risks that we do know we're taking, and we should manage those effectively and efficiently, and we have processes and tools and techniques for doing that. But what about the ones that we don't know that we're taking? We need to have a broader view of risk so that we can manage all of the risks that our projects and programs face. and not just our projects and programs, or our organizations, or our societies, or our nations, but ourselves and our families. So let's start at the very beginning. What do we mean by the word risk? I hope I don't insult you by starting at the very beginning. But we have here some pictures which maybe illustrate your view of what risk really means. A big, ugly thing which challenges us, which faces us, which threatens us. Or this picture of a Chinese soldier, a real picture. I wouldn't want that job. But for some of us, we feel as project managers, we are the target. And people are aiming at us because we're responsible for our project. Or maybe, like the swimmer in Australia, something out there is threatening me. I can't quite see what it is, but I know it's bad. Is that how we view risk? That's one view of risk, but it's not the only view. Let's go back to basics and ask ourselves, what's the difference between risk and uncertainty? Are they the same thing? Are the interpreters taking two words and saying, well, risk is uncertainty and uncertainty is risk? I think we know intuitively that they are different. But how? What is the difference between risk and uncertainty? We could have a philosophical discussion. We could have a mathematical discussion. But as project managers, we want to have a practical discussion. So here is a practical distinction, a separation between risk and uncertainty. Risk is uncertainty that matters. Because most of the uncertainties in the world don't matter. Is it going to rain in London this afternoon? I don't know, you don't know, we don't care. It's an uncertainty, but it doesn't matter. We're not in London. The rain can't affect anything that would be important to us. If it might rain in Rome this evening, that might matter because we have dinner plans, because we want to do something outside in the open. So what we need to find is the uncertainties that matter. And how do we know what matters? In projects, in programs, and in organizations, what matters is defined in our objectives. So any uncertainty that could affect our objectives is a risk to us. If it doesn't affect my objectives, I don't care. It might affect your objectives, and so it's a risk for you, but if it doesn't affect my objectives, it's not a risk for me. So risks have two characteristics. They are uncertain and they matter because they affect objectives. And these two characteristics are the basis of risk management. We talk about probability and impact, or likelihood and consequence. Probability is a measure of how uncertain something is. Impact is a measure of how much it matters. The basic two dimensions of risk come from these three words. And we find these words reflected in all of the international standards definitions of risk. And some of them are here on the board. Each one has the word uncertainty, and each one has the word objectives, and lots of other words to connect them. Risk is uncertainty that can affect objectives. And so when we're looking in our risk registers to see if we have the real risks to our projects, we should be sure that everything in the risk register is uncertain. We're not talking about problems or issues or constraints or requirements or things that are true that we wish were not true. We want to find things that might or might not happen. And we want to see things in our risk register that matter, that could affect our objectives if they do happen. And in my work as a risk specialist, I've worked in 51 different countries around the world, in every continent except the Antarctic, which is much too cold. Maybe I'll go one day, but I hope not. I've seen hundreds of risk registers, and up to half of the content of a risk register often are not risks at all. Either they're not uncertain or they don't matter, or they matter to somebody else. So it's a good test to check your risk register for these two dimensions. And that leads us to two key questions when we're thinking about what we mean by the word risk. If risk is uncertainty that matters, what kinds of uncertainty are we interested in? And in what ways could they matter? And usually we answer those two questions in the same way. We say that the sorts of uncertainties we're interested in are future events that may or may not happen. And the sort of mattering, the reason that they might matter is if they affect our budget or schedule negatively. So we might overspend or be late. And another word for an uncertain future event with a negative effect on budget or schedule is a threat. So for most people, most of the time, when they think of the word risk, they think of the word threat. A risk is a bad thing that might happen in the future. If it does happen, it affects my budget or it affects my schedule. And I guess you might think of risk like that. I would like to challenge that thinking here. Risk is much more than uncertain future events that might have a bad effect on our budget or schedule. Risk is any uncertainty that matters. Any uncertainty. And so I think we're missing two areas of risk. There are other types of uncertainty, not just uncertain future events. And there are other ways that risk matters, not just negative effects on time and cost. So I would like to, this morning, expand our thinking in these two dimensions, to think about other types of uncertainty, not just uncertain future events, and other types of mattering, not just the effect, a bad effect on time and cost. And hopefully that will open your eyes to the types of risk that you're taking on your projects without seeing them, without knowing about it. And the good news is that for each of these other types of risk, there are well-developed ways of identifying them and managing them. So don't worry that you're going to go out of here with lots more things to worry about, lots more things to lose sleep over, lots more things to spend time on trying to manage. These things are easy, and all we need to do is see them, and then we can deal with them. So let's start with the mattering side. That's the easy side. If a risk is an uncertainty that matters because it could affect our objectives, what kinds of impacts or effects are we interested in? And the first thing to say is, we're not only interested in bad things. If you could find something that might help you in the future, it might happen or it might not, but if it did, it would save time or it would save money, does that matter? Is that worth identifying and trying to manage proactively? Of course it is. If I can give you a list of things that, if they happened, would save time and money, you would want that list. And you would want to do everything you could to make those things happen. There are uncertainties that, if they happened, would help us, as well as uncertainties that, if they happened, would hinder us, would hurt us. Both of these things matter, and both of these things need to be managed. So managing risk, if risk is uncertainty that matters, it includes the good things as well as the bad things. Risk management is about not only preventing potential problems, stopping things from going wrong on our projects, it should also be about finding potential benefits. Things that might save time and money on our project, that we could proactively manage in order to help us achieve our objectives. And we have words for uncertainties that could help us, as well as uncertainties that could hurt us. We have them in English, you have them in Italian. In English, we use the words opportunity and threat. An opportunity may never happen. It's uncertain. It could be there, maybe it's not. So it has a probability of occurring. It's a risk, but it has an effect on our objectives. If the opportunity does occur, then we save time and money, and so it's an uncertainty that matters. And a threat may never happen. It's uncertain, but if it does happen, it slows us down, it costs extra money, and so on. So it's an uncertainty that matters. Both opportunities and threats are types of risk. Risk is a double-sided concept. And for most people, they only see the bad side. We're not aware that there are things that might happen in the future that could help us achieve our objectives. So we don't look for them. We don't find them. We don't capture them, and we don't gain the benefits. So there's probably half of the risks that we're missing right there if we only see risk as potential bad things that could affect time and cost. And then I say time and cost. Oh, before I come to that, here's a picture. Now, this picture is just a silly picture I found on the internet, just to illustrate this idea that risk is not only bad. If you are the mouse, and the mouse is a project manager, of course, what are the uncertainties that matter to you as the mouse? And of course, we say, the trap. I see the trap. The mouse sees the trap, and he's prepared. He has his helmet on. He goes very, very carefully. Good project manager. We need to see the traps in our project. There's actually a trap door here. It has a little bit of black tape on it, which doesn't look very secure. And I'm a bit worried that if I stand on it like this, I may disappear. So I'm aware of the trap, and I'm walking around it very carefully. And there are many traps in our projects. We need to protect ourselves and go carefully so we don't fall into the trap and be injured or die. And our project could be damaged or could be killed. Of course we need to manage those uncertainties. Are there any other uncertainties that are important to the mouse? It's the cheese, right? Can he get the cheese off the trap? It's uncertain. He doesn't know. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. If he can, it helps him. It helps him by feeding him, by giving him energy, by giving him strength. And he wants to get the cheese off the trap, as well as not being injured or killed. And in our projects, there is cheese. And what is the cheese in our projects? Cheese is value. Cheese is benefits. Cheese is products and services that people want and need. Cheese is the good things we're trying to do through our projects to change society and the lives of our stakeholders. So what we need to do as project managers is to get the cheese, which is not certain. That's why project management is difficult. That's why project managers are so valued. That's why project managers have such big salaries, because we're doing such a difficult job, right? Haha, that was a joke. So we have to do a difficult thing to get the cheese out of our project. But we also have to do a difficult thing to stop the traps. And if the mouse gets the cheese out of the project, but he's killed, he's failed. If we deliver a system, but we're so late and so overspent that it's just a disaster, we failed. But if we stop all the traps from triggering, we don't make the trap happen, but we don't get the cheese, the mouse has also failed. If we're on time, on budget, and we don't create any value or any benefits, what's the point? So of course we have to do both. And if we look at just one of these definitions of risk from your good friends and mine, the Project Management Institute, in the latest version of the PMBOK guide released last month. It says this: uncertainty that matters. A risk is an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, affects objectives. And there are three missing words here. The missing words are cheese and trap. Well, not really. But the same idea, what PMI has said, is that it's an uncertain event or a condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect. This is built into all of the standards, the ISO standard, the UK standard, the PMI standard, and so on. These all have this idea that risk is good as well as bad. And of course, what we're trying to do is find the best possible way to get as much cheese off the project and the smallest possible chance of springing the trap, and there's always a better way. So, that's my first point. Not all risks are bad, some are good. And then we have the question of time and cost. Is it true that risks only affect the project budget or the project schedule? I don't think so. Any objective, if it's important, if it matters to the project, it could be affected by uncertainty. So we have our technical performance or our ability to comply to the regulatory framework. Or maybe there are safety regulations. For the wider company in the organization, we're concerned about market share or reputation or competitive advantage. Any uncertainty that could affect these things is something that matters. And so we should manage it proactively, not just time and cost. So when we're identifying risks in our project workshops, let's not only be concerned with the budget and the schedule, let's also think about technical performance. Let's also think about shareholder expectations and relationships. Let's also think about our contribution to the strategic objectives of the organization. These things matter, and they need to be identified and managed. So on the mattering side, when we think about risk being uncertainty that matters, we find that there are positive as well as negative impacts. Risk includes opportunities as well as threats, and that all objectives are in the scope of the risk process, not just time and cost. So I hope that's clear, I hope that's obvious, and I hope that's something that you can implement quickly on your projects. Let's also look for good things as well as bad things, things that might or might not happen, but if they happen, they would help us. And let's look broader than just the project, budget, and schedule. So that's the mattering side. What about the uncertainty side? Now, here things get a little bit more interesting, shall we say. So I hope you're ready for an intellectual challenge or a thinking challenge. If we look at the various definitions of risk, we find that risk is not limited to things that might or might not happen in the future. It's not all about uncertain future events. So the PMI has an extra 2 words. A risk is an uncertain event or condition. What does that mean? The UK Association for Project Management has the same idea. It's an uncertain event or set of circumstances. The ISO standard 31000 says risk management addresses all types of uncertainty. All types of uncertainty. So what are those? What are the conditions or the circumstances or the other types of uncertainty? I'd like to suggest to you that our projects are subject to 4 types of uncertainty. One of them is uncertain future events. And 3 of them are something else that we usually forget. Now, here is where I challenge Elisabetta and Roberta in the interpreter's box with these lovely words: stochastic uncertainty, aleatoric uncertainty, epistemic uncertainty, and ontological uncertainty. And I know that they've done their homework, and they understand these words very well. Do you? Do you have any idea what these different types of uncertainty are? Now, it's a little cruel of me to expect you to translate this risk specialist jargon. So I'm going to give you some natural language translations, if you like. Stochastic uncertainty, the Greek word stoche, means a stick used as a target for archers. And you either hit it or you miss it. A stochastic uncertainty is an event that either happens or it doesn't happen. So these are what we normally think about when we think about risk: an uncertain future event, the stick that you hit or miss. Okay, it happens or it doesn't happen. Now you should know the next word because it comes from a Latin word. The Latin word alia means dice. Okay, it's a dice when you play a game. And so when you throw the dice, it has 6 sides. You're going to get one of the 6 sides. You just don't know which one. So the uncertainty is not in the event. It's not the throwing. We're going to throw the dice. The uncertainty is in the result. There is variability in the result. Something is going to happen. We just don't know what. And so if we're, let's say, building on a construction site and we're going to dig a trench, we know we're going to dig a trench. What will we find? Will it be the regular soil that we always find? Will there be rocks? Will there be pipes? Will there be buried treasure? Will there be dead bodies? We don't know. And the effect is, or the uncertainty is, what's down the trench. So we have uncertainties which are different from future events. The future event is certain. We're going to dig a hole. The effect is not certain. What we find could be one of a number of things. Then we have epistemic uncertainty. The Greek word episteme means knowledge. Epistemic uncertainty arises from lack of knowledge or lack of understanding. And in English, we use the word ambiguity. We're not quite sure about something. We know there's something there, we can't quite see what it is. And we need more information, more detail, we need more understanding in order to know what we're facing. These are not future events that might or might not happen. These are not doing something and we're not sure what the outcome is. This is where something will happen and we don't understand it. So that's a different type of uncertainty, and very often in innovative projects, in entrepreneurial organizations, in agile projects, we're faced with ambiguity all the time. And as we go up from projects to programs, to portfolios, to strategy, ambiguity increases. So we need to think about this as a source of risk. And lastly, ontological uncertainty. Again, Greek words, logia means study, on means existence. Ontological uncertainty is about things which we can't imagine, things which are outside of our frame of reference, things that are beyond our current worldview, things that we have no concept of, things that just arise without us expecting them. And so we call them emergent risks. I had no idea that there was somebody standing behind me with a long stick about to poke me. Or what's behind here? I have no idea what's behind here. It could be that there's comfortable chairs to go and sit in. Oh, that's an opportunity. Maybe I'll go off there after my speech. There are things that we don't know, that we can't see, that might affect us. So all of these 4 things are important. And I'd like to run through how they might affect your project and what you can do about them. Okay? Because I believe most of us think only about type 1. So let's start with what we know. Stochastic risk, or uncertain future events that may or may not happen, are things like a key supplier going out of business or losing a resource just when we need them. That would be bad. Or maybe good things, like the client saying, actually, it would be helpful if we just had incremental deliveries instead of all at the end. Oh, that would be really helpful. Yes, please. Or one of our subcontractors may suggest a better way to do one of our standard processes. It might happen. That could be very useful. These are the sorts of threats and opportunities that we usually find in our risk registers. And the standard risk process is very well designed to handle them. So we identify threats and opportunities through brainstorming, through checklists, through workshops, through a number of different techniques. We analyze the probability and impact, we develop responses and implement them, and we review the results. Basic, standard risk management. And it works. It works for uncertain future events. What about the other 3 types? Oh, and I should just say for this, it also works for opportunities. So it's not only for the bad things. So we talk about maybe the client might change their delivery expectations. If we think that will be useful to us, we could go and chase that proactively. Instead of saying, well, we've identified that it could happen and it would be useful, let's just sit back and hope they do. Let's go and talk to the client and say, can we negotiate with you incremental deliveries? And is there a way that we can do that that still meets your needs while making it easier for the project? And so we could proactively try to make that happen. That's what the standard risk process does. Okay, let's look at these other three types. The dice. Throwing the dice, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. You're not quite sure which one. Here we have a certain future event. So it's not an uncertain event, but some characteristic about it is uncertain. So we throw the dice, we know we're doing that. The result is not sure. So here are some examples. We're going to run a trial on our project. We plan for it to take 10 days. 10 days is the plan. It could take 9 or 8 or 7 or 5. It could take 15 or 20 or 25. There is uncertainty in the duration of the trial that we plan for 10 days. A certain event, but the duration is uncertain. We have a productivity target. It could be higher or lower than we expect. Raw material costs. There's something in the budget for our raw materials. They may change over time, and so on. These things are variability in something which is planned. And it affects most of our projects most of the time. Is it in your risk register? If it is, how do you assess it with probability and impact? What is the probability that the trial might take longer or shorter than planned? And how do we put that in the risk register if it could be better or worse? Do we have two risks? We have something which it could be better and there's a probability, but how much better? And it could be worse, and how much worse? How do we put these things in our risk register? We can't. So we need a different way of identifying and managing variability in our projects. The standard way of doing this is to use quantitative risk analysis. In quantitative risk analysis, what we do is we replace single point estimates with ranges. So I plan a 10-day trial. The best it could possibly be is 5 days. The worst it could possibly be is 25 days. And so my 3-point estimate of 5, 10, 25 represents the variability risk in running this trial. And you don't have to do Monte Carlo simulation. You can just identify those ranges on your most risky activities as a way of understanding the variability risk that you're facing. What is the chance that our productivity is above or below target? It's probably 90%. It'll be somewhere different, but we can represent the variability in our budget plans and have a range of possible costs based on variable productivity on key tasks. So quantitative analysis with ranges and distributions is a standard way of understanding variability risk. Now, a lot of organizations are scared of quantitative risk analysis. They think it's hard. They think it requires specialist software and really well-trained and expensive experts. And if you talk to some of our friends in the Exposizione, in the expo side, they will tell you, please buy my software and we'll come and help you to do this. And it will cost you a lot of money. Actually, that's not true. Some of the software out there is great. But it doesn't just require expensive software and expensive experts to make this happen. You could work to understand the key points of variability in your project, to scope that variability, and to look at how that might affect your overall project performance. It's easy to do. We should be doing it as project managers because it's an uncertainty that matters. Okay? So here we're still more or less within the standard risk process. Let's step outside that and think about something which often is really forgotten, because we don't like to admit to ourselves that there are things that we don't know. or that we don't understand. And epistemic uncertainty is about my knowledge or my understanding. It's how well do I know what might happen on my project. Here again, we're talking about things that we know will happen, but there's some aspect of it that we don't understand. So, for example, we know we're going to launch a new product. We know the competitors will respond in some way, but how? Will they be scared by our new product and run away and leave the market? Will they be challenged by our new product and themselves develop a new product in competition? Will they be interested in possibly forming a partnership and saying, let's put our products together and do something that works for both of us? We don't know. There are aspects of this which reflect our lack of understanding. We know the regulations are going to change. That's been announced by the regulatory authority, but how? We're not sure. How might that affect the requirements of our project? These sorts of things are uncertainties that matter, but we have very difficult, we don't really have any good ways of scoping them. And again, putting them in the risk register, how do you reflect something that you don't know? I first came across this, I guess it would be about 1985, and the problem was we had a stupid project manager. And there was a lot of things, he'd been promoted, and it was a big, big project, a £30 million project. I was the assistant junior deputy project manager, and he was il project manager, he was the boss, that's il supremo. And so he thought he was in charge. He was a commander in the Navy, and he was not very clever. And so the biggest risk was the stupidity of the project manager. How do you write that in the risk register? We wrote things about inadequate decision making or about poor processes for strategic direction. And he just said, well, I don't understand. Show me, how is this, give me an example. And you couldn't say, well, you remember the last meeting when you made that stupid decision? That's what I'm talking about. So we find this very hard to put into our risk register, but it is clearly an uncertainty that matters, and not just stupid project managers, all sorts of stakeholders. So here's the way we should do this: prototyping, incremental delivery, use of agile methodology, benchmarking, or bringing in expertise from outside to see where things could and should be done differently and better. If we lack knowledge and lack understanding, we can find out if we know where the area of ambiguity is. So we should think about exploring and experimenting, about trying different things, about having prototypes and pilots, about having a development red team or tiger team that are trying to break the system and apply new things. These things will help us explore our areas of ambiguity. Maybe we need to subcontract to a specialist subcontractor who understands this area. Maybe we should hire somebody in who knows how to do this better than we do. So there are a number of ways we can address ambiguity risk, and it's very important. So let me move on to the last of these areas, which is emergent risk or ontological risk. And this is the area where we have the most difficulty. These are risks that are completely outside of our thinking. Things that we have no idea could possibly exist, but they do exist. They are things which are not only unknown, they are unknowable. You could not find this out no matter how hard you sat and thought, or how many workshops or brainstorms you had. It is beyond the worldview or the thinking frame, the mindset or the experience of everybody in the room. Now, we use the term black swan. That's the picture in the corner, black swan. Why do we use black swan to describe these? In the 16th century, we knew for sure that all swans were white. All our experience, you have a big bird, long neck, big wings, lives on the water. It's a swan, and it's white. Every swan you've ever seen is white. Well, the babies are grey, but they grow to be white. We knew that was a fact. If it wasn't white, it wasn't a swan. Then we went to Australia and eventually to New Zealand. And in those countries, we found big birds, long necks, big wings, they live on the water, they're black. Can't be a swan, because all swans are white. And then they did, and so it had a different name. It was put into a different scientific family. It was not in the swan family. It was something different, some strange Australian thing, like the kangaroo and like the platypus and other things, which are special to Australia. Then we discovered swans could be different colours. It really was a swan, and it just happened that we had no concept that such a thing was possible. And so the idea of the black swan is now used as shorthand, as code word, for things that exist out there that we have no idea about. We are convinced they're impossible, then they happen. And here are some examples from the past. It's not possible to give examples for the future, because if I could imagine it, then it's not unknowable to me. If I tell you, here is something I can't think of, then I've just thought of it. So the financial crisis, of course, nobody knew. Nobody knew it could happen. And suddenly, because of the connectivity in the world, the way the financial systems were structured and linked together, suddenly the world is in crisis. We had the fall of communism, and here is the Berlin Wall in the 80s, just collapsed. And not just this one wall, the whole system. And then we used to believe that capitalism and communism and the Cold War, and this was a battle between equals that would go on forever. And suddenly there is no Soviet Union. There is no Warsaw Pact. There is no massive communist bloc. And so why do we have NATO? And why do we have all of these other organizations? The world suddenly changed. Further back, we had the invention of the internet, which has turned out to be a very good thing, completely changed everything. And then social media. This was the original logo of Twitter. I know it's different now, but then, and how long has Twitter been here? And how has social media changed the world in those few years? Here in Italy, you might think of the migrant crisis and how that affects your southern brothers and sisters. And that's completely unexpected. And suddenly you find there are hundreds of thousands of people invading or joining our societies and creating all sorts of threats and opportunities that we never foresaw. We have Brexit, something that you said would never happen. My country voted to leave the European Union. It will happen somehow, sometime, and the negotiations are underway. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? We never conceived it was possible. We were locked in, and suddenly the people voted differently. And maybe Catalonia this week, we might find something else. Maybe today there's something which we never thought could happen, will happen. So these things really occur on our projects. Suddenly you find there's an Uber in your area, in your sector, which changes your entire world. Suddenly you find someone invents something in one sector which becomes important in your sector. Maybe artificial intelligence suddenly changes everything for you. Who knows? And we have to find some way of managing emergent risk. How can you manage it if you can't see it? How can you manage it if it's outside of your entire frame of reference? We can't manage the thing because we can't see it. But we could prepare for the effect of some unseen thing that we can't imagine. This is called continuity management. We do it in business. Imagine that we lost our entire IT facility. Well, how could that happen? I don't know, but just imagine we did. What would we do? Imagine that 50% of our workforce couldn't get into work. What would we do? Well, how would that happen? Well, no, never mind that. It could be a pandemic, it could be a traffic strike, it could be a terrorist event, it could be, I don't know, something might happen. How would we cope? And business continuity management is thinking about something, this is how we would prepare if something happened that we can't imagine. We could do that for projects. Project continuity management says, what would I do on my project if my customer said, I've had a very good idea, I want to do the opposite of what I originally said? Or, I don't know, I just imagined that. Or something completely unexpected happened. A key competitor just suddenly takes over our company and fires the entire project team. But I'm the project manager and I have to carry on. That would never happen. If something happened, what would I do? And so resilience, flexibility, the sorts of techniques that we use in business continuity management, we should consider for our projects and for our programs. And we should have a project continuity plan that's part of our risk management. It's not the risk register, it's not the quantitative analysis, it's something different. And it copes with this kind of emergent uncertainty. So these appear to be unmanageable because they're unknowable. In fact, we can prepare for the things that we can't see. And although they might be rare, often when they do happen, their effect is very big. And so we need to do something about them somehow. They are uncertainties that matter. Okay, so I hope that's just broadened your thinking a little bit beyond uncertain future events. When we think about the uncertainty side of the uncertainty that matters definition, there are 4 types of uncertainty that we need to think about. They all are uncertainties that could affect our project, and they all need to be managed proactively. And if you can't remember those technical jargon words, remember these: events, variability, ambiguity, and emergence. Those are the types of things we need to be prepared for and to manage proactively in advance as part of our risk management. So risk management becomes much more challenging, much more interesting, much more relevant than we originally thought. Often we would think that risk management is boring and risk management is negative. Please, do I have to go to another risk workshop? How depressing. We're going to go and spend an hour thinking about all the ways the project could go wrong. And then I'm going to come out and think, why do I bother managing the project? It's doomed to failure. And I have a list of all these things I've got to try and manage, and they probably will never happen. And I'm wasting my time. Why don't I just get on and manage? Let's put that over here. Let's just get on and manage the project. Now we have a different way of thinking. What we're looking for is the things that really could affect our projects, the things that really matter, the real risks to our projects, and we're going to try and deal with them. This is important because how you think about something affects how you act towards it. Thinking, belief affects behavior. So what you believe a risk is will affect your risk management. If you think risk is only uncertain future events with a negative effect on project time and cost, that's what you'll work on in your risk process. And you'll be probably quite successful in finding those things and minimizing or avoiding them. Good, well done. But what about the other things that you're not thinking about and therefore not managing? If we think rightly about risk management will be more effective. It will work better. And when risk management works better, we maximize the chances of achieving our objectives. We have an easier life as project managers because we have fewer surprises. There aren't so many things going wrong on our projects because we saw them coming in advance and did something about them. There are more good things happening on our projects because we spotted them coming and we made them better and we captured them. We didn't find there were problems suddenly arose which we could have done something about, but we didn't. A risk, a threat turns into a problem. We don't find there are opportunities, oh, if only I'd seen that, I could have saved a month on my project. No, we saw it. We moved into position and we captured it and we saved that month. So we don't have so many avoidable problems that happen, and we don't have so many missed benefits that we could have captured. Risk management makes us more successful. But if we don't think straight about risk, our risk management won't be effective. So if you don't identify a risk, it doesn't mean it's not there. What we're doing for most of us is we're just going along focused on a little piece of risk and saying, well, this could happen, I'll work on that. And we're missing all the others and taking the risks with our eyes closed. Just like Mother Duck. Don't worry, no ducks were harmed in my presentation preparation. This is just Photoshop. But the point is clear. Often in our projects, we say, follow me, I'm going this way, and we'll all be fine. And then you turn around and you say, what happened? How did that happen? Because we didn't see the risk that we just took. And we should see those things and do something about them. Risk is uncertainty that matters. Any uncertainty that matters. Not just uncertain future events that could have a negative effect on project time or cost. When we think about the uncertainty side, it does include uncertain future events, but it also includes variation in tasks that we plan to undertake. It includes risks that arise from our lack of understanding or knowledge, and it includes the things that come from as a complete surprise from who knows where. Each of these things are types of uncertainty that could affect our project, and we need to identify. But only if they have an effect on our project, only if they matter. And the mattering is in two types, things that hurt us as well as things that could help us. Both threats and opportunities must be in scope for our risk process. And not just thinking about the project budget and the project schedule, but any project objective that could be affected by any of these uncertainties, then we need to know about it and we need to do something about it. Risk is any uncertainty that matters. And that leads us to some closing questions. Questions from me to you. And I guess we may have the opportunity for questions for you to me. Is that a possibility in the schedule or not? I'm not sure. Maybe later. But here are my last two questions to you. First of all, what risks are you taking in your project without knowing? Where are the positive future events that could help you achieve your objectives, the opportunities, the things that would save time and save money? Where are the risks that could affect other objectives, like your safety objectives or your performance objectives or your contribution to margin objectives, not just the time and the budget? Where are the risks that arise from variation in planned tasks and risks that arise from your lack of knowledge? How would you cope if something completely unexpected happened? These are the sorts of risks that we generally miss. So the challenge for us is to include all the uncertainties that matter, both in our thinking and in our practice. Some people call me a thought leader, but I'm really a practitioner. I'm just an ordinary project manager person like you. I manage projects and I have to think about the things that could go wrong, the things that could go well, and what can I do about it. These are different ideas, but the idea of thought leadership is to lead to better practice. So if you don't think like this, ask yourself, why not? Is it just habit? Is it training? Is it ignorance? You never knew these other types of risks were out there. Would it be possible for you to change your thinking and your practice in risk management for your project to include these other types of risks? And the most important thing, what changes are required to do it, and will you do it? So I hope you found that interesting as an opening piece on the broader picture of the types of risk that affect our projects. And that it will help you to manage your projects more effectively so that your projects will be more successful. It is possible using real risk management, tackling the real risks, including the ones that till now you didn't know you were taking. So thank you very much for your attention. That's the end of my presentation.